Alright, what's up everyone? Antonio Fletcher back with you once again. Today I'm going to be responding to Jaclyn Glenn's video, Why I'm an Atheist. I found some serious problems with their reasoning for coming to atheism, reasons which I've heard from many other atheists before. So without further ado, let's get into the video now.
Hey guys, so this is going to be a random spur of the moment video for me. A lot of people ask me questions about what happened to me to make me an atheist, at what point in my life did I become an atheist, and there wasn't one catastrophic event in my life that happened to me. A lot of people phrase it like that too. What must have happened to you? There's nothing wrong with me. Nothing traumatic happened. It was actually a really gradual and slow process. And it was something that I fought myself on because I grew up Catholic. I was raised Catholic from kindergarten to my senior year in high school. And then in college, I became evangelical and I felt like I needed it, like I was gonna go to hell. I felt like I needed to tell other people, otherwise they were gonna go to hell. I was nuts. And then eventually I slowly started to let go of it because I was lying to myself. And it took me a long time to admit to myself that it was a giant lie. My doubt probably started whenever I was in high school because one of my best friends was gay. And I never in my life, even whenever I was at my most right-wing, most evangelical point, did I ever discriminate against people who were gay. Because that was a normal thing to me, because my best friend was gay, and whenever people discriminated against him, it did not make sense. So to see other people use the very religion that I held so near and dear to my heart to bash someone that I was also very close to, I just couldn't reconcile that. And whenever I looked in the Bible and read Leviticus, where it actually said that you should put homosexuals to death, I tried for a long time to cherry pick that, but eventually I had to come to terms with the fact that that's in there and it should not be.
Okay, rather than just giving the response that putting homosexuals to death was an Old Testament law, which we are no longer under, which either Jaclyn is ignorant about and didn't bother to research, or she knows this and is intentionally being a fool to suit her sinful pride, I'm also going to add some further context as to why homosexuality was such a serious thing worthy of death in that era. You see, atheists today have this idea about homosexuality in our culture, emphasis on our culture today, as opposed to the theocratic culture back then, that it's just two adults of the same sex/gender who love each other. But if you clearly analyze scriptures like in Genesis 19, in which in Sodom where you had men attempting to force Lot to bring out the men which came to him, which were actually angels, to have sex with them, and when he refused, they literally tried to get into his house by force by breaking Lot's door, in which case the angels simply blinded them so they couldn't find the door and get into the house. We aren't simply dealing with a culture here of adults which love each other, but of rampant violent sin, in which the root cause of it was the homosexual lust of men. That alone is a huge reason why that sin was worthy of death. It wasn't merely the act of homosexuality, but the implications of the perversion as a result of it. And it's clear to me that many atheists haven't done any deep research of the level of depravity in those cultures and confuse the culture they live in today with the culture of many thousands of years in the past. The lust was so deep in it that the punishment for it was very severe, which in turn was death. But of course, I realize that even taking this context into account probably won't be enough for the non-believing scoffer, in which case it's an issue of attempting to cast pearls before swine at that point. But let's continue on further in analyzing her reasoning.
The morality that I have is a secular morality. It's a morality that I get from the society that I live in, from the people that are around me, and from what I personally feel is right and wrong. It's definitely not something that I got out of a book like that condones murder, is against gay people, condones rape, condones slavery. I mean, if you actually read it, it's a very fucked up book, to be honest. And whenever you're raised Catholic, you read the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and also certain cherry-picked Bible verses are read at Mass, but you never actually read the Bible.
Oh my goodness gracious, where do I even start in with addressing all this nonsense she says? These issues she brings up, which are not really issues in reality at all, have been addressed countless times, which she conveniently gives no direct scriptural reference for at all, nor even any context to see if she even remotely has a clue what she's talking about. Now, I'm going to borrow a line here from our atheist friends that I've seen used often in the past. What is claimed without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. She gives no evidence to back her claims, so I'm going to dismiss her statements without evidence. Not because there are no answers to address the issues she brought up, but because I'm throwing their logic right back at them. And she claims her morality is a secular one based on the society she lives in and the people that are around her. Well, maybe except for any logical, intelligent thinking Christians which might be around her who can address her nonsense. Where does she get any basis from her secular view to conclude the Bible is an effed up book as she claims? She gives none at all. Furthermore, what does she mean by actually read the Bible? There are lots of very intelligent people who have actually read the Bible and came to a different conclusion than her. It's obvious her version of quote unquote actually means that if you disagree with her view on the Bible, you haven't actually read it. If she's going to say what's actually is in it, she needs to give a case and basis for what she's saying rather than making empty claims without evidence.
So doing that was one thing that actually really helped. A lot of people are like, what book can I read? And they're thinking I'm going to recommend a Richard Dawkins book, which I will, because The God Delusion is amazing. But if you want to read a book to really make you an atheist, I'm going to recommend the Bible.
Of all the books she could have named, besides her claim that the Bible is the best book to make one an atheist, she names The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. This is ridiculously embarrassing on her part. If I had as many hands as the atheist's beloved flying spaghetti monster has pasta tentacles, that still wouldn't be anywhere near enough hands to facepalm with to deal with this total nonsense of hers. If she honestly thinks an argument like who designed the designer is a powerful argument, which is one of the arguments Dawkins uses, then she couldn't be any more of an amateur atheist thinker. Let's continue on.
So beyond the personal experiences of having a friend that was gay, I got a lot of education in the medical field. I actually went to medical school for a couple of years, and the thing that I learned that was most important wasn't the technicalities of how to diagnose different things or specifics about how the human body works. It was how to be analytical, how to be critical, how to use my brain to think critically, how to be skeptical. Those things are what made me really question the Bible and really question these things that I had just been indoctrinated to believe, that I had just taken at face value for so long.
Now, beyond her talking about her Catholic upbringing, I have no idea how she was raised. But if it took her going to medical school to become an analytical thinker, to become a more critical thinker, then that is probably the product of the failure of whomever raised her and or whatever education she had before she went to med school. If she was truly indoctrinated to not think for herself, then I cannot honestly put the entire blame on her for that. However, in her acquired awareness of critical skills and analytical thought, she should have applied that same kind of thinking to approaching the Bible and learning about things of the Bible in which she had difficulty reconciling. In any case, the answers to the things she can't reconcile within the Bible are available to her, but it's clear she's suppressing the truth in unrighteousness, as Romans 1:18 says.
Another really big thing that I learned was to say, I don't know. I don't have the answers. I mean, a lot of times patients would come in and they would be very frustrated whenever you couldn't give them a very specific diagnosis. There's a term in medicine called idiopathic. It's what you say whenever you do not know the cause for something. Sometimes all the tests that you do to diagnose somebody come back negative. There's nothing wrong with them, and a lot of them don't want to hear that. They want you to tell them they have something, even if that something is horrible, because having an answer feels good. It makes you feel like you're in control of your life. And whenever it comes to religion, there are a lot of things in this life. You know, whenever you think about philosophy, whenever you think about our origins, whenever you think about how small we are and how much is out there in the very beginning of things, sometimes you start to question, how it happened. Is there something more? These are normal questions. But what isn't okay is to just fill these things with an answer or God, using the God of the gaps. I'm sure you guys have heard of that. It's not okay to do that whenever you don't have the answers. You should use science. This should be something that provokes you into wanting to discover more things, not just giving yourself an answer because I don't know isn't good enough. Sometimes it should be.
Here's where her hypocrisy really starts to become evident. She claims that sometimes simply saying, I don't know, is good enough, and it's not good to simply throw God in as a gap to commit the gaps fallacy. However, she didn't apply this reasoning when she struggled with certain things in the Bible. She seemed quite certain the answer, based on her perception, was the Bible promoted things like rape and slavery. She clearly didn't take time to ask herself, this doesn't seem right on the surface. I don't know. and at least remain agnostic-like in said approach until she did further investigation. She says we should use science, but science isn't the only means of assessing the world around us. In fact, she isn't even using science to make her argument. She's using philosophy. She's engaging in the very fallacy she's accusing those who commit the God of gaps fallacy. She's saying, I don't know, therefore science is ultimately the explanation, since science is what she appeals to.
And when people come to me and they're like, well, prove me wrong. Tell me why there isn't a God. Prove that there is no God. I can't do that, just as much as I can't prove that there is no flying pink unicorn, that there's no flying spaghetti monster. I can't prove any ridiculous claim. And a lot of people use the phrase, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, which is the most ridiculous argument that I could ever hear somebody use, because like I said, that could literally be applied to anything that I make up.
Okay, Jaclyn, the phrase absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence isn't ridiculous at all. It's the obvious fact that you simply clearly do not understand the application of the concept, Jaclyn. For example, we currently do not have any evidence there is gold on Mars. However, does that mean therefore there is no gold on Mars? Of course not. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. However, that is only one element of the argument. She says that such a concept can simply be applied to any ridiculous concept made up, which she gives no argument that the concept of the God of the Bible specifically was simply made up. That's where the other element of the argument comes in, and that is positive evidence of the non-existence of thing X. For example, we don't simply argue the absence of evidence of the existence of Santa Claus is not evidence he doesn't exist, but rather that we do in fact have positive evidence he does not exist. In our satellite technology, we have positive evidence there isn't a toy shop on the North Pole. As well as with such technologies, we've never seen a jolly husky man in a sleigh flying around with reindeer on Christmas Eve. So, we then take the next step to analyze if positive evidence indicates such things which seem like made-up concepts do not exist. That's the other element to the argument, and Jaclyn either isn't aware of that, or she deliberately ignores it in blatant dishonesty to argue her failed point. She is showing a stunning level of amateur ignorance in how she goes about arguing the God concept, and it is beyond me why anyone takes her seriously at all. But let's continue on with addressing her nonsense.
The burden of proof is not on me. The burden of proof is on the person making this extraordinary claim. You've all heard it, right? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If you don't have evidence, I'm not going to believe it.
Now, it is true to say that the burden of proof lies upon the one making the claim. However, if such evidence is presented to the person who is asking for the evidence, they simply cannot dismiss it without an argument. The burden at that point then shifts to them to examine the evidence which was given to them and make an assessment on whether said evidence is sufficient or insufficient, and actually provide reasoning behind said assessment, not simply act as if what was presented to them really isn't evidence. It also comes down to another thing. What would be sufficient evidence for the individual to accept so they would believe? Proof is different than persuasion. It's not simply a matter of refusing to believe something in which no evidence is presented, but also a matter of having the basis for which evidence is acceptable. In my personal experience, the overwhelming majority of atheists I've encountered have had illogical foundations for what they deem to be acceptable evidence. So when you really dig into the nuances of the discussion, it is really ultimately a two-way street.
I put a very high value on evidence. A lot of people point to any random thing that they see, and you will see Christians and people of all different faiths doing this all the time, where they say, well, just look at the trees, look at the stars, look at the beautiful nature. God did that. That's not evidence. That's evidence of trees and evidence of stars and evidence of nature, not evidence of something supernatural that there actually is no evidence for.
Alright, Jaclyn talks as if she's never encountered a well-informed, logical, thinking Christian in her life. All these issues she's pointing out comes from amateur level of thought. And what does she mean by it's not evidence of something supernatural there is actually no evidence for? And how could she possibly know there is actually no evidence? She just made a positive claim which requires the burden of proof, so she needs to go by the same rules she argues others need to adhere to. She puts a high value on evidence, yet her claim it's not evidence of something supernatural there is actually no evidence for, requires evidence for her to back it up itself. The irony and hypocrisy is just laughable.
A lot of these people cling to different religions and sometimes very specific things within that religion, and they don't realize that there's around 4,200 different religions in the world right now, and they don't believe in 4,199 of them, yet they're so certain in the one that they've picked, and everyone else is wrong except for them.
Now this is really getting worse and worse for Jaclyn as this video rolls along. She obviously stands firmly at the present moment. In her view, there is no God or gods which exist, yet she takes issue with people holding firmly to one thing over many other views. She has one particular view she holds to as well. It's not simply a matter of the views of higher deities, but of a whole host of collective views regardless of whether or not they include a deity in them. So with the thousands of views and beliefs which exist, why is she firmly settled in her atheism? If anyone is going to take a stand on anything and truly believe in something, of course they're going to have a strong, firm belief in it against other competing beliefs. This is a product of simply standing by something you believe in, not a product of merely thinking, well, I believe your view, religious or not, is correct over everyone else's. What she is attempting to do is separate atheism from the rest of the belief systems out there to attack from the outside, instead of being honest and apply all belief systems in the same way, be it deistic or atheistic beliefs. She is attempting to suggest that since there are so many theistic beliefs, it's arbitrary and meaningless to necessarily think only one is correct over the others. However, this works for atheism as well. There are many derivatives of atheistic beliefs which also exist, such as Buddhist atheism, satanic atheism, spiritual atheism, etc. But I don't see her playing the same game for those, and why choosing one brand of atheism over the others. She really isn't being honest at all.
And their evidence is just that feeling that they have.
You're just continuing to show your stunning level of ignorance here, Jaclyn. Now, there are people out there who would argue things like Christian belief just on feelings, but it certainly doesn't apply to all people who believe. Again, it just goes back to what I said earlier, and that's Jaclyn talking as if she's never spoken with a well-informed, logical thinking Christian.
From my scientific education, it's very hard for people to say evidence whenever it comes to stuff like that. Just the same where they're like, oh, that's just a theory. When talking about evolution, they don't realize that gravity is a theory. These are words that you can't just throw out there. My standard for evidence is peer-reviewed, testable evidence, falsifiable. The stars are pretty is not evidence to me. Sorry.
This is the problem with atheists like you, Jaclyn. You like to compartmentalize everything into the scientific method of observable and testable scientific evidence, when there is also other criteria like historical evidence, archaeological evidence, philosophical arguments, etc. Science isn't the end-all and be-all. This is clearly a stumbling block you have to get over. You want to talk about what isn't evidence to you when it can be just as much talked about how illogical your criteria for evidence is, as I point out earlier in this video. Again, proof is different than persuasion.
And the dangerous part of this is people actually take a lot of this stuff literally. They think the earth is 6,000 years old. It terrifies me that otherwise intelligent people from hopefully an intelligent species cannot reason to that low of a degree. I mean, you can show somebody something, you can put the actual evidence right in front of their face and they'll ignore it because some ancient book of fairy tales says something else. And they cling so strong to this belief in something out there that they're not going to believe something that's right here.
At this point, I'm starting to feel like I'm really wasting my time in responding to all your nonsense, but the reason I'm doing this is for the benefit of those who may not be privy to just how bad your arguments are. You generalize believers as if they all hold to a 6,000-year-old Earth age, then you continue your diatribe nonsense by begging the question and assuming the book in which people read and believe in must be a fairy tale. It is not enough to claim other people don't have evidence because you've made multiple claims in this video alone, which you haven't provided any evidence for. As a Christian, I will ask you, How do you know the Bible is a fairy tale? You admitted earlier, Jaclyn, that you couldn't prove there is no God, yet you are so sure the Bible is a fairy tale. If you can't prove there is no God, then you certainly can't prove the God in the Bible is a fairy tale either. As I said earlier, in the midst of you making these claims, Jaclyn, you need to provide positive evidence of the non-existence of X, in this case, God. And furthermore, your hypocrisy continues by claiming something can be put in front of the face of a believer and they'll just ignore it. Well, atheists are not immune from this either. A believer can put something in front of them and they can just ignore it. But I don't see you complaining about this. Your level of intellectual dishonesty is simply off the charts, Jaclyn. It's simply beyond embarrassing.
And I don't like the fact that a lot of religions teach people to not think. It's almost like your mom is yelling at you and says you can't do something. A lot of times you would say, why? Right? And then she responds saying, because I said so. What child is like, oh, okay, yeah, because she said so. That makes sense. I'm satisfied with that answer. I don't think so. I think every kid would be like, no, I want to fucking know why. But in a religious world, whenever God says something, you don't question it. The because I said so answer is A-okay.
Sure, there are religions out there in which may tell people not to think. However, that isn't biblical Christianity. 2 Timothy 2:15 says to study to show oneself approved. 1 Thessalonians 5:21 says, test everything, hold to all which is good. The Bible doesn't say anywhere that we can never question God. But even with the parent analogy Jaclyn brought up, not always do parents tell their children why when they instruct them. Sometimes they just tell them to do what they're told and they'll understand when they're older. It's getting more and more clear that this video of hers explaining why she's an atheist is more about attacking believers than it is about why she's an atheist.
Do not question anything in religion. You know, if God actually did create you with everything that you have, then he created you with a brain. So if you are really religious and you can't get around the fact that maybe there isn't a God, at least don't cling to these ancient, ridiculous things that are presented to you as fact that are clearly untrue, and things that are presented to you as moral that clearly aren't. At least throw those out.
Among the plethora of nonsensical talking points she's given in this video, she keeps making claims she hasn't backed up at all, and she makes yet another one here, alluding to ancient texts which are clearly untrue, as she puts it. For someone who claims to look at evidence very highly, as she admits herself, she is very quick not to adhere to her own standard and double standard hypocrisy. And also, what does she mean by things which are presented as moral which clearly aren't, as if she's arguing like she has some objective standard on what is moral and what isn't? The sheer level of ignorance, nonsense, and fallacies continue to pile up on you, Jaclyn.
I don't believe that an all-knowing, all-powerful, benevolent God would actually punish those people. I think he would actually appreciate atheists for being honest with themselves and people around them.
Well, Jaclyn, I hate to break it to you, but Romans 3:10 through 12 makes it clear that there are no righteous people and not one person does good. So it's really about the fact that people in their own hearts are unrighteous. They are in fact not being honest according to Scripture. Also, the fact that you don't like the judgment God has for those who want to go their own way has no bearing upon anything. You don't have to like it, but not liking it isn't an argument. He provided a way out of judgment through Jesus Christ. So if you reject that way out, there is nothing left but punishment. If a parent is offering their child a chance to get off the hook for something wrong they've done, but their child is basically like, I don't care what your condition is, then what other recourse is left for the parent than to punish their child for refusing to accept what was offered to get out of their punishment? Same goes with God. All you're really doing here is talking about your personal feelings, but your personal feelings are not arguments. Remember when you alluded to the personal feeling a believer has and how it doesn't amount to evidence? Well, neither does your personal feeling about how God goes about things amount to an argument.
according to Christians, if we were created as sinners, then we were created imperfectly on purpose. And if we weren't created imperfectly, if we were perfect in the Garden of Eden, and God knows everything, He knew that they were going to eat that fruit, He knew that they weren't perfect, He knew they were going to sin, He knew all of this was going to happen, and He let it happen anyways. That means we would have been purposefully made to fall into sin and temptation. And the only way out of this is to worship and essentially ass kiss the very being that put us into this shitty situation to begin with. Either that, or burn in hell forever. How do people think that this is a wonderful God? Like, that's really fucked up. I'm gonna screw you over, make you to do bad things, and then threaten to punish you for those bad things that I made you do unless you kiss my ass forever or burn in hell for all of eternity. That's really wonderful.
So here, Jaclyn goes off ranting on a tangent, giving typical amateur atheist talking points and outright losing it, throwing a hissy fit. Here, she really gets angry about God's foreknowledge and blaming God for putting His creation in a bad position, as she puts it. First of all, such doesn't prove that God does not exist, and only proves that she doesn't like the way God does things according to her perception of God's character. Second of all, God knowing all things, how could she possibly show there wasn't something in God's all-knowing nature in which there wasn't possibly a good reason He did things the way He did, despite knowing all things beforehand? In her limited knowledge in nature, she cannot possibly sustain the burden of proof there wasn't a good reason for God doing things the way He did. Her getting angry at God, talking about things like ass kissing and whatnot, is just an appeal to emotion, nothing more.
And I'm sorry, I don't care what you say. You cannot deny that a society that is less religious is more tolerant of other people.
Alright, Jaclyn, first of all, there is no deity required to be religious. Yes, even atheists can be and act just as religious, just like anyone else. Second, whether a society is more or less tolerant is not a product of religion versus non-religion, but a product of human decency. It doesn't matter what philosophy you hold to, and tolerance can run rampant when it's coming from irrational people, such as the religious Pharisees and non-religious leaders like Pol Pot, Stalin, and Mao Zedong. So I actually don't care what you say, Jaclyn. Religion versus non-religion in and of themselves do not necessitate a more or less tolerable society.
So these are some of the reasons why I'm an atheist, how I became an atheist. I think that overall, religion is a bad thing. And even though I don't believe in religion, I talk about it a lot, and this is something that people don't understand, but it's because I live in a society that's heavily influenced by religion. It affects my life daily, and I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to fight for people's rights that are being taken away by something that I think is outdated and unnecessary. And I don't miss it. I don't at all. I feel so much better. I feel like a weight has been lifted from my shoulders, and I feel more fulfilled in my life. I appreciate every day that I have, because I know that there isn't anything for me after I die. And the same thing for other people. Try to go out of your way to help other people, because it's also all that they have. Sending prayers to a starving child in Africa does absolutely nothing for them. Sending money does. Don't try to make yourself feel better by saying, I'm praying for them, God will reward them in heaven. There's actually something in the Bible about that. Or, happy are those who are poor, whatever. I don't know exactly how it goes, but it says they'll be granted everlasting life or something. You know what? No, they won't. Help them now. This is it. This is all we have.
Here you go again, Jaclyn, you making all these conclusive statements like prayer doesn't help and this is all we have, when you cannot possibly prove that at all. Didn't you say earlier in this video that it is sometimes okay to simply say you don't know, yet you completely abandon that line of thought when you make these conclusive statements? The level of embarrassment you have revealed in this video is simply off the charts. Also, let me put something else to you, Jaclyn. Christians aren't just saying pray for people. The gospel also instructs us to go out into the world. The overwhelming majority of people going overseas to help those starving children are typically believers, most of the time Christians, not atheists. I'm not saying atheists don't do good things for people or ever go overseas, but the overwhelming majority of the time it is Christian missionaries doing these things. We don't simply pray, Jaclyn, we do. We can do both, and we do both. And it's really interesting how you put on as if you were so tolerant of other people's views, yet you are clearly hostile to religion, even saying that it's bad, making it no secret you have a problem with it, believing that it's harmful. If you were really so bothered by religious views, get in the way of your life, then why do you still live in the United States where the overwhelming majority of persons hold a particular religious belief and the majority are atheists? And the minority are atheists, I mean to say. If you have such a big problem with religion influencing your life, then stop living in a country where you think it's having a consistent influence on your life. Case closed.
So yeah, atheism makes me a better person. It makes me a happier person. It makes me appreciate the only life that I have. I'm not waiting for anything after I die. I'm living now. I'm a better person now. And that's why I make videos like this. Because I feel like this is such an important topic that so many people are afraid to talk about. They think atheism is this nasty, negative thing. They think that atheism is a statement that you know that there is no God and you can't know that, but it isn't. It's just a lack of a belief in God because we have no evidence. Agnostic, atheist, whatever it is that you want to call it to make yourself feel better. Everybody should technically be agnostic, by the way. But yeah, atheism is not a statement of knowing that there is no God. It's just saying I don't believe it, and because of that I promote life in a secular society. So those are my thoughts. I know that I rambled a lot in this video. It wasn't really planned. These are just a lot of things that I have in my mind all the time about the topic, and I talk about atheism a lot in my videos, but there aren't very many where I just sit down and give you my reasons for why I personally am not religious and why I think it's so important.
You know, it's funny, Jaclyn, you claim atheism makes you a better person out of one side of your mouth, then claim out the other side of your mouth it's simply a lack of belief. Logically speaking, that doesn't even make any sense. Only things which have positive properties can make one a better person, not a lack of anything. The lack of belief in unicorns do not make you a better person. The lack of belief in the flying spaghetti monster doesn't make you a better person. Listen to how this sounds. Oh, look at me. I'm lacking belief in the flying spaghetti monster. Look how much of a better person I am. You went on this full-on attack of theism, mostly Christianity, rather than simply saying why you are an atheist. This has to be by far one of the saddest videos you've ever done, and I'll put it to you frankly like this, Jaclyn. You are absolutely not prepared to debate an intelligent, well-informed Christian. I've seen much better arguments from atheists like Sam Harris, but the display in this video was a total joke. With all the fallacies you've committed and the contradictions in this video, nobody should remotely take you seriously as a representative for atheism. And so, thanks for watching everyone, God bless, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.